Well, I'm joined today by the Athletics Spanish football experts Dermot Corrigan and Tomas Lopez-Menchero. Continued in-depth coverage of La Liga on the Athletic. But if you're just a casual observer, let's just catch up on some of the foundations. Real Madrid's 1-0 win over Real Mallorca maintained top spot in La Liga, albeit level on points with Girona, who beat Atletico Madrid in dramatic style. Both those teams sitting 10 points ahead of third place Atletico and fourth place Barcelona. Real Madrid in fantastic form, as you would expect. 15 wins from 18 games unbeaten in all competitions. 15 wins from 19 in the league and only 11 conceded. Jude Bellingham, just as the cherry on top of the icing, is the leading scorer in La Liga as well with 13 goals. Gents, from you on the title race, Girona, they're still there as the nearest challengers. They are super competitive, but it is only their fourth La Liga season. Are Real Madrid genuinely worried about them staying the distance, Dermot?
Yeah, I don't think so. What Girona is doing is absolutely incredible. Really, nobody would have predicted. Like, they've been building well. They have some backing from the Man City group, but maybe they might have been predicted to challenge for a Europa League spot this season at best. So to see them flying at the top of the table, having scored 4 goals against Barca, 4 goals against Atletico is incredible. It does kind of hide a little bit the fact that Madrid have built up such a big lead over Atletico and over Barca. Barca have a game in hand. They're going to play tonight against Las Palmas, so maybe they'll cut it to 7. But even still, Madrid have motored away from their two main rivals in the table. Just lost that one game all season at Atletico, back in September, one at Barcelona. And that's even though they've had, a lot of injuries to deal with. It's been really good job by Ancelotti. Bellingham has been incredible, and they look, I'm sure they are odds on to win the title, and the feeling among the squad as well is that, they have to win this one. And also that maybe affects, whether they move in the transfer window, because they don't really need to strengthen the squad if they have such a big lead in the table.
Obviously, Thomas, it does look tight to the outside. And as Dermot has highlighted there, there is the expectation that Girona will drop back, but it just shows almost the extra gear that Real have had so far this season, and the control that they have on their destiny this season.
Yeah, as Dermot said there, I mean, the lead they've taken over Barca and Atletico is pretty remarkable. I think I totally agree with Dermot. What Girona are doing is amazing. It maybe does have some parallels with Leicester in how the big boys, apart from Real Madrid, are kind of falling away a bit. I mean, Barca being 10 points behind Madrid would be considered a massive failure if that gap were to stay the same by the end of the season. And I also think if we remember that Girona were beaten 3-0 by Madrid back in September, that suggests that when push comes to shove, Madrid really should be considered favourites for this league title, even despite the number of injuries they've suffered in key positions.
They won 1-0 last night with a header out of corner. Weren't playing particularly fluidly in midfield or anything. They won a couple of weeks ago, just before Christmas, at Alaves with a late winner there, 1-0 as well, at a relegation-threatened team. It's not that they're blowing everybody away or fantastically superior, but they have a lot of experience in the squad. Ancelotti knows what it takes as well, and there's just not that much of a challenge to.
You mentioned Ancelotti there. Obviously, the whole proposition has been strengthened even more. The fact that he's agreed a new contract through until 2026. Just for people who might have just seen the sort of the story developing over the last 12 months, people were saying, no, he's going to Brazil. He's going to be the Brazil manager. And then the sort of shift in dynamic. What happened there? Was that a big surprise?
It was just a very strange situation to have a country as big and as storied, historic giant like Brazil without a manager for so long, and seeming from their point of view that they were sure that Ancelotti was going to come to them at some stage. While the word around Madrid was that Ancelotti was still their manager, he was still in charge there. He was under contract until the end of this season. There was a feeling that maybe because it's Madrid that Ancelotti played it well. That at Madrid you're always only a bad run away from at least speculation over your future, or an embarrassing result away from the chop. When Madrid lost at Atletico earlier on this season, Atletico much the better team that day. Talk of Ancelotti being out of contract at the end of the season, you start to wonder, maybe is his time coming to an end? Maybe Florentino Perez, the Madrid president, is looking elsewhere. But I guess kind of from Ancelotti's point of view, he likes life in Madrid. Was always kind of his number one option was to stay and extend at Madrid. Brazil were almost like a backup for him, which is pretty good backup to have. Things have been going so well at Madrid, and there's no obvious contender to take over either as the next Madrid manager. So it just kind of made sense for him or for the club to extend his contract. Having said that, if Madrid were to blow this lead in the table, were they to crash out of the Champions League, then who knows? It wouldn't be a huge surprise for Perez to decide, look, even though you've just renewed your contract a couple of months ago, we're going to go in a different direction. But it does mean that Ancelotti has a little bit more safety, I guess, in the job, and that I guess Brazil are going to look elsewhere now.
No, I think that's the surprise to me, is given how ruthless Perez has been in the past with Real Madrid managers, to reward Ancelotti midway through the season with a renewal of this kind is pretty remarkable. I mean, if Ancelotti were to see out this new deal, which, as Dermot said, there's no guarantee of that, he would have been in Madrid for 7 years across 2 spells, and again, that's unheard of under Perez. But it suggests it's a big show of confidence. Basically, suggests that Perez sees Ancelotti as the man to lead this new generation of players, the likes of Vinicius Junior, Rodrigo, Bellingham, Federico Valverde. So that's a big show of confidence from the president there.
The impression I always got from listening to Ancelotti and from talking to people who know him was that his first choice was always to stay in Madrid and around Madrid. He really likes the city. His partner has Spanish family. His son is working under him at the club. That Brazil was a great plan B to have, but he's spoken so often about how he loves thinks Madrid is the biggest club in the world. He always kind of mentions along with Milan because of his background at Milan, but it seems clear to him that he doesn't see any club job as being similar to him. He's into his 60s now. He said at the press conference there the other day that he might even stay another couple of years past the 2026 date that is in it, but he's also well aware, and he's sure of this, that he knows how quickly things can change at Madrid, that in 6 months' time that he might not be here. So he'd be happy to have different clauses in his contract and to talk about different possibilities for the future. But he's a super practical guy, super knowledgeable guy, super experienced, and he knows what it's like working with owners like Florentino Perez, or previously with Berlusconi or Roman Abramovich or the guys at PSG. And he will just be... It's hard for me to imagine him thinking too seriously about what's going to happen 3 or 4 years down the road. He's looking at strengthening his position at Madrid for the future, or for the moment, and getting on with winning La Liga and maybe challenging for the Champions League as well.
And just a little bit more on that. On The Athletic, we have reported that there is an agreement within his new contract that Ancelotti can continue at the club even if it's agreed that he won't be as the coach. Just explain as much as you can on that for us, Dermot.
Yeah, I think Ancelotti has to be considered one of the greatest coaches Madrid have had. 10 trophies won across his 2 spells in charge is really good. But I also think it's the fact he's the perfect star manager. He's shown during both of those spells that he's able to keep the key stars happy, which is not always a guarantee at Madrid. We've seen how Benitez and Mourinho have struggled at times when the players haven't exactly revolted, but haven't necessarily been following their instructions as they would have liked. And there's situations this season, with Luka Modric, Brahim Diaz, players who maybe at the start at least weren't playing as much as they would have liked, where other managers might have crumbled. But Ancelotti again has shown himself to be this consummate man manager, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for his tactics either. Without the diamond system this season, we don't see the best of Jude Bellingham. So from that point of view, it makes sense. And he's also a trusted Perez lieutenant. In recent years, Perez going back to Zidane for a second spell, Ancelotti for a second spell. Maybe he's becoming less adventurous in his old age.
Okay, so we've laid the foundations on Ancelotti, on how the team are playing. But now let's concentrate on one man who would certainly make them better, and that is Kylian Mbappe. So, is summer 2024 finally the time for Real Madrid to sign Kylian Mbappe? Now, we know that he's got 6 months remaining on his current contract, and that was signed in 2022, and he can now negotiate with other clubs, and that obviously includes Real Madrid. And interestingly, he spoke after scoring Paris Saint-Germain's second against Toulouse. This is what he said. No, I have not made a decision on my future. I'm very, very motivated for this year. With the agreement I made with the president this summer, whatever my decision, we managed to protect all parties and preserve the club's serenity for the challenges ahead. Okay, Thomas and Dermot, what is different now compared to back in 2022 when Madrid thought that they'd done enough to sign Mbappe? Let's start with you, Dermot.
Yeah, not that much is different now in that Mbappe still at PSG. He's still in a great negotiating position, and he still has PSG who really want him, and I'm pretty sure he still has Real Madrid who really want him. So he has, in many ways, played it really well, and it's coming up to another kind of poker game between some of the biggest people in world football, some of the richest men in the world who are fighting over him. Another big thing that has changed is that Karim Benzema is no longer around at Real Madrid, so they really do need a new big name centre forward. I know Mbappe's not, a traditional centre forward maybe, but he could play there. They need a goal scorer, Real Madrid. Couple of things which changed. Vinicius Junior has emerged as a really top world class left sided attacker, which is where Mbappe often plays. And Jude Bellingham has emerged as a really top class goal scoring attacking midfielder. But there's still that hole in the Madrid squad for a really top centre forward. They still have the money, I think, if they really wanted to go and sign him, that they could. But it's up to the kind of the politics that's involved. It's Mbappe himself, whether he really wants to push for it. And I guess we're set for, a lot of conversations and a lot of speculation and a lot of reporting on The Athletic as well. Mario and the guys have done some really good work on it. So it's really well set up for the next couple of months to see how it's going to play out.
And Thomas, do we see it developing within this month of having some sort of resolution? Because obviously we've highlighted there that conversations can be happening, and it's all okay for that to be happening. Are we expecting to find out what's going to happen in the summer this month?
Well, I'm sad to report it's probably anyone's guess. I mean, Mario reported this month that Mbappe had been given a mid-January deadline by Madrid to basically decide if he wants to move there. But if that deadline were to pass, would Madrid still want to go for him? I think probably yes, because that's what's happened over the last couple of years. It's interesting what Dermot says there about the Vinicius Junior. It's not a problem because he's one of their best players at the moment, but they obviously both play in a very similar position. I'm still yet to be convinced as to whether Mbappe and Vinicius could play together and both be at their full potential, but I don't think there's much logic in this. I think it's just a star signing that Madrid have craved for so long. By some estimations, it's been 10 years since they've been tracking him, and they'll stop at nothing to get him. Seems to be the impression from previous years.
And Dermot, from
the mid-January deadline is interesting. Sorry,
go on, mate. Go on.
That mid-January deadline is really interesting because there have been a lot of people at Madrid who've been a little bit annoyed at Mbappe over time. They felt that they had, if not an agreement, they thought they were very close to having an agreement. There have been so many negotiations over years, as Tomas said. That's the thing about, just because it's become 2024 and he's into the last 6 months, it doesn't mean that they're re-picking up negotiations from last summer. There's constant contact through intermediaries and through different people who know each other. The relationships there go back a long way. Those relationships have been strained, including personal messages between Florentino Perez and Kylian Mbappe, who learned Spanish as a teenager in possible preparation for just this move. So it's not a case of it being as Tomas said, like a make or break month or a make or break part. But at some stage, Madrid's patience might run out with Mbappe. It's Florentino Perez at Madrid who really makes the decisions. And if they're going to spend the type of money that's needed for wages and for a signing fee, he's the guy who's going to have to sign off on it. He was upset, as far as we know, at being turned down before. He's not a guy who's used to giving in. We've seen over the Super League, just this last couple of weeks, that it was something that everybody thought, had gone away. He stuck in there, kept fighting, found a way to keep it alive. I'm not saying the Super League is definitely going to happen, but it's just an example of Perez never taking no for an answer and always trying to find a way to get what he wants. So the next, whether it's weeks, months, as Tomas said, there is going to be, there might be more than one deadline that will come along before it all gets finally sorted.
And it seems, even though Kylian Mbappe is saying I'm focusing on the club that I'm at and I've got things that I want to achieve here at Paris Saint-Germain, that the mood music is moving towards this move that has been destined, as you've mentioned previously, Dermot, to happen for quite some time. But what are the consequences for Mbappe if this negotiation period or maybe this brinkmanship doesn't have a smooth ending? He's going to be 25. Is he going to have more opportunities in the future? Does it have to be now?
I think Dermot's definitely right in saying that Perez isn't a man who likes his patience being tested. But from my point of view, at least from the outside, do you think that as one of the best players in the world, Madrid are always going to want to sign those kind of players? And I don't think you can emphasize enough how transformational a signing it would be, even in terms of commercial revenue. We've seen how well Bellingham did this season, but he wasn't a kind of proven Galactico whose name was on every fan's lips, whereas Mbappe has been on every fan's lips for years and years. So from my point of view, I think Madrid are always going to want to sign him. But having said that, the sagas of the last few summers have clearly taken their toll on the Madrid hierarchy.
We saw last summer when Madrid did need a centre forward. Karim Benzema went to Saudi Arabia, and pretty sure that coaching staff, Carlo Ancelotti, would have been happy to get Harry Kane to come to Madrid. There were indications that Kane would have at least considered a move to the Bernabeu. But Madrid, even though they knew at that stage that Mbappe wasn't going to happen, didn't make a move for Kane. Left that centre forward size gap in the team, left that big name Galactico centre forward size gap in their budget as well, because Mbappe is the guy. Maybe Haaland is the only other player around the world who might be able to come in and fill that. But because it's been such an obsession over so long, that Thomas is dead right to say that the new Bernabeu is going to be open, or it's finally going to be finalised. They have a lot of VIP zone tickets to sell, a lot of corporate sponsors to impress, and Mbappe has been identified a long way back as the best guy off the pitch as well to increase the club's revenue. He's a guy who's already won a World Cup with France, but you kind of think from his point of view that at some stage, is Paris Saint-Germain good enough for him? Because there was a chance they wouldn't go through their Champions League group, winning another Ligue 1 title, or the French Championnat trophy that they won last night. Is that really going to make him happy? He might look at Madrid and see that they're odds on for another La Liga title, that they're going to be challenging maybe better than Paris Saint-Germain to win the Champions League. So from his point of view, you'd kind of think, as you said there, Adam, that he's getting into his mid-20s now. He's moving into a stage where he has to make that maybe next step in his career to move to Madrid. And there's no sign either of other clubs. The Premier League, I'm sure there's a lot of clubs in England who would love to have Kylian Mbappe, but I've never really had an indication that he was that interested in moving, whether it is to Manchester City or Manchester United or Chelsea or whoever. It's always the case that when he does leave Paris Saint-Germain, that it will be to go to Real Madrid. It's just been that the pressure's on him, whether it's from the president of France, or whether it's from coming from Qatar, or coming from the amount of money that was thrown at him the last time, that it's always kind of made sense to delay that move as opposed to put it off. And maybe this summer is the time when it makes sense again to actually finally come here to Madrid.
Now, you've both mentioned some of the interesting elements of bringing Mbappe into Real Madrid. Maybe the impact on Vinicius Junior and how do they play together. Dermot there speaking about the fact that they know about the pull of a Galactico player like that. But just in general terms, for them to finally announce the signing of Kylian Mbappe, how much of a moment in the club's history would that be, do you think? Thomas or Dermot, who wants to go first?
It would be huge. I wonder if it probably would be the first true Galactico signing since Ronaldo arrived back in 2009. That's the only thing I can compare it to, because you're talking about a truly world-class centre-forward, established centre-forward. Because you're talking about a truly world-class forward joining at the peak of his powers. And I think it would have a big cultural impact in Madrid as well, because realistically, people who don't even know anything about football in Spain have still heard Mbappe's name repeated over the years. So for him to finally join, I think would be, well, it will probably be the crowning moment for that project of bringing in youthful signings, which Perez has led from the front.
Yeah, for sure. Like it would be massive, and you can have this idea of the newly renovated Bernabeu. It's finally going to be finished probably for next summer, or that's the hope at this stage, that they can show it off with the futuristic skin around it, with the amazing atmosphere inside, and it is a fantastic stadium, and it's really amazing what they have done with it. It's cost them a lot of money, and they have to start to pay it off. And Perez needs a win as well. I'd say that the Superliga, court victory was a partial victory maybe, or at least a defeat for UEFA, if not a win for the Super League. But he's still a feeling that Madrid are not quite as playing right at the top of the market, that Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City have more money than them, have maybe more cachet than them in a kind of a modern kind of way. But Madrid would like to restate that they are the biggest club in the world, that the best players in the world want to come here. It's been a while, players like Bellingham, like Tchouaméni, Camavinga that they've signed recently. Going back to Eden Hazard was the last maybe big star who came, and that was such a disappointment that it would, with the reopening of the stadium, it would kind of reaffirm that greatness that Madrid have, and that is so important to a lot of the Madrid fans and especially to Florentino Perez.
So obviously Kylian Mbappe is still, even though the deal is likely not to be happening until the summer, is going to be the big story connected with Real Madrid during this transfer window. And not to sort of come back down to earth with a bump, I do want to discuss some of the other things that might actually be happening literally and tangibly in January. And it's maybe a little bit more mundane, but where do they stand on looking for a new centre-back? Because it seems as if there's sort of contrasting messages coming from inside the Bernabeu.
Yeah, for sure. Like Madrid really could do with a new centre back cover, because they lost Militao to a cruciate injury right back at the start of the season. They lost Alba to another really serious injury just before Christmas. So they were the two starting centre backs for Carlo Ancelotti. Rudiger has come in and done very well. He's an established German international. Nacho, utility player, has been at the club for over a decade, can do a decent job. But they're the only two fit centre backs that Madrid have at the minute. Nacho was suspended last night, so Tchouaméni was filling in, and he's a good player, but he's not a centre back at all, really. Ancelotti said when Alba got injured that we'd be looking to sign a centre back in January. There was talk maybe of going for somebody on loan, or getting in maybe an older player who could come and do a job short term for them. That seems to have gone away. Not sure if it's coincidental or not, but the first press conference after Ancelotti had signed his new contract, he said, "No, we're not looking for a centre back. We're happy Tchouaméni can play there. Dani Carvajal can come across from right back and fill in there." And that's typical of Ancelotti's ability to manage up as well as down. Tomas was saying what a great man manager he is, with players in the dressing room. He's also pretty good at keeping the people above him happy and following the message. He knows that he doesn't control transfer policy at Madrid, and no matter how loud he screams in the press for a new centre back, that he doesn't get to make the final decision. So maybe something will change. If the weekend Rudiger gets injured, then for sure they're going to have to look at something, and maybe an opportunity will come along later in the market to pick somebody up on loan or a low budget deal. But they won't be going out and spending a lot of money on a centre back. They've been offered players for sure. A lot of younger players around Europe look at Madrid's policy with Tchouaméni and Vinicius and Camavinga, these guys, and say that we'd like to do that too. It's seen as a place where good young players can go, and even though it's a top club, they'll have a chance to play and to become stars. But at the moment, unless something changes, then Madrid are going to go into the rest of the season with just two fit centre backs, which is potentially a big problem for them, especially when the Champions League comes around.
It was interesting, Dermot, that you mentioned the potential of a former player returning maybe on a short-term deal. Rafael Varane is not enjoying his time seemingly at Manchester United. There's been reports of fallings out with Erik ten Hag. Those have sort of been denied softly here and there. He has been playing a few minutes here and there again, and maybe nothing's going to happen there. But would that be something that you could see happening and be welcomed, maybe?
It's super interesting one. It makes sense in a lot of ways, because Varane, knows the club so well, knows Ancelotti, a lot of the teammates who are still there, guys like Kroos and Modric that he would have won a lot of trophies with. On Varane, he's kind of seen as a symbol here of how cleverly Madrid can offload players. That Varane's form had already started to dip before he left Madrid. There was some really bad mistakes against Manchester City in a Champions League game during the COVID Champions League summer, I think. Suddenly his stance had kind of fallen. He wanted to get a new deal. New deal wasn't there. And it kind of made sense for everybody to sell him. Maybe Casemiro is another example of somebody who Madrid have picked the right time to move him on. So it might have made sense for him to come back, but it wasn't that he was as highly rated by the Madrid hierarchy as he had been when he was right at the peak of his Madrid career, maybe a couple of seasons before that. So maybe that's some of the thinking around why they decided against making a move for him, or seem to have decided anyway against making a move for him this month.
I think that's actually a good point to move on to the squad restructuring at Real Madrid, which they've done after such a huge, dominant period of success, which we'll do next. And Dermot, I think it's interesting, mentioning Rafael Varane being a good example of how well Real Madrid have evolved their squad over the last few years. And we can move on to, what they have done. But let's just quickly return back to Kylian Mbappe, because if he came in, that would almost rubber stamp the complete transformation that they have done. And I think it was mentioned by Mario in one of his articles that he would be the signing for the next decade. And they have a squad pretty much now that could dominate for that sort of period, couldn't they?
Yeah, they've been building really cleverly. I think they saw the example, or at least you can contrast it with what happened at Barcelona, where Xavi and Iniesta and Piqué, Jordi Alba, these guys went on a little bit too long in the first team while still earning a lot of money. And then there's the Messi point as well, whereas Cristiano Ronaldo was kind of jettisoned by Real Madrid, or told that he wasn't going to get a new contract. Madrid were happy to sell him to Juventus at the time, and that was because they were already planning for a new team to come in. They've had guys like Vinicius, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, this summer Bellingham. They've signed Militao, young guys, teenagers in their early 20s who they had identified as the future stars. Madrid realised that they weren't able to compete with Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain right at the very top of the transfer market, that they were rebuilding the stadium, that COVID hit them, that they just weren't the richest club in the world anymore and had to be more clever about it, and have been, very astute in the players that they've signed. Not everybody has worked out. Martin Odegaard came, he was part of that. He didn't work out at Madrid and has now gone on to be very good in England. But generally, they've been really successful with it. And Mbappe would be an ideal addition to a group of players who are coming together, growing up together, kind of even winning a Champions League along the way a couple of years ago when they beat Liverpool in Paris. And it's been, Florentino Perez, you can criticize a lot of the things he does, maybe, but in this, he maybe has learned from past mistakes, and they have very cleverly moved from that Ronaldo, Benzema, Gareth Bale team to a new team with, Vinicius, who's the leading striker at the minute. And then if Mbappe came in, would be ideal, and ideal timing as well this summer.
Tom, if you look in last night's lineup alone, you've got... Oh, sorry, Adam, I'll go. If you look at last night's lineup alone, you've got Valverde, Bellingham, Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr. from the starting lineup, all of whom are 25 and under, but have become these key players for Madrid. I think Madrid fans probably have chief scout Juni Calafat to thank for that, particularly when it comes to unearthing the young Brazilian talents like Vinicius or Rodrigo. And we haven't even mentioned Endrick, who's joining this summer. So it keeps on happening. I guess I'm still a bit skeptical as to how the likes of Modric and Kroos are really going to be phased out. I mean, we saw at the start of the season that looked like that was happening, but Ancelotti has continued to call on them principally because of their quality and injuries to other midfielders, right? So it's a pinpoint Modric cross that leads to Rudiger's goal last night. So he doesn't look done, even though he's 38 years old. Kroos is only 34. I'm still a bit skeptical as to how well they'll take being phased out of the team if that does indeed continue to happen this season. But at the moment, the future proofing across the pitch looks really impressive from Madrid.
But it's interesting that you mentioned the likes of Kroos and Modric. They're not destructive characters, are they? That are likely to really kick up a fuss if they are phased out. But at the same time, they would also be players. Hang on, let me say that again. It's interesting that you mentioned Kroos and Modric. They seem like perfect players to continue to help nurture younger talent alongside them. They're not destructive characters that would maybe cause issues or want to dominate the headlines, are they, Dermot?
Yeah, for sure. Like if you're going to sign, Bellingham and Tchouaméni and Camavinga and Valverde, the best young midfielders in the world, who better to have than Kroos and Modric at the club for the amazing technical ability that they have and their ability to run a game and to know what is needed in each moment of a game, but also just for their general work ethic. And they're two guys who rarely get injured, show up to training, have a really good attitude. Ancelotti loves that. Zidane loved that in them both as well. There have been other older players at the club, Bale most obviously, but even Sergio Ramos, towards the end of his time at the club, he was club captain, but he wasn't seen from the very top as maybe the best example for the younger players in the club. So even in the players that they have kept and the players that they have jettisoned over time, Madrid under Paris in the last 5-6 years have done it really well, and they've done it on their terms as well. Like the guys, Modric, Kroos are signing 1-year contracts. Nacho as well is in his 30s. If it suits the club, they'll keep them. If it doesn't suit the club, they'll let them go. There's no there's no real emotion in it. There's no maybe we owe him just another year's contract just because he's been a great servant for the club, which maybe might have happened at Barcelona. It's all cool. It's all calculating, and we assume that maybe this is Modric's last year. Kroos is playing phenomenally well still. He's given up international football as well, which is a big deal. Madrid like that. They don't particularly like when they see Modric going off to play for Croatia during the international breaks. So Madrid will do what's best for Madrid, and Toni Kroos will also do what's best for Toni Kroos. He's a big character, a strong guy. But they have, it's just worked out really well with Ancelotti as well as the kind of guiding force with those two guys who he relies on so much.
And obviously, during this evolutionary period, they've been deconstructing the side that was so dominant in the Champions League, winning 4 out of 5 Champions League titles between 2014 and 2018. Obviously, they won another one 2 years ago. But Thomas, how much is it talked about at Real Madrid about that era? Does it feel like a bygone era now, even though it was only 5 years ago that it ended, that period of intense dominance of the Champions League?
I think it's pretty telling that era has just kind of smoothly transitioned into this one now, and the fact they won the Champions League obviously in 2022 helps as well. But I can't think of many teams in recent years who have made that transition so seamlessly, and it looks like it's just gonna continue with these young players. I thought what Dermot said there about the younger players learning from the likes of Modric and Kroos is really interesting as well. Sometimes we see it the other way around, Bellingham picking up Modric after the Clasico win at Barcelona, which is really interesting. So there's definitely this kind of exchange of ideas happening from the older players to the younger players, and probably vice versa as well, which is making Madrid such an effective team.
Yeah, Madrid would, just on that, Madrid would pride themselves in being that ruthless that, if whatever happened 2 years ago is no good to us, what can you do for me tomorrow? And they always talk about how the next game is the most important. And a coach like Ancelotti is only maybe 3 or 4 games away from his job being in question, and a player is only 3 or 4 games away from maybe Madrid looking to sign somebody else to replace them. And that, we've seen big players whistled at the Bernabeu. Cristiano was whistled. Bale obviously was whistled a lot, but even Zidane going back in time was whistled that if you're not able to do it for me now, then Madrid will move on and will sign somebody else who is willing to do it or capable of doing it. And that helps, I think, when these type of transitions come along, that there's no, as I said before, that the emotion is taken out of it, that they just worry about the next game, what you can do for me next, and it's working out pretty well for him.
And Thomas, you mentioned him a little bit earlier on, Endrick, who is going to be the next big thing that's going to join Real Madrid potentially when he joins in the summer when he turns 18. How much can you tell us about the potential that he has and how quickly he could be escalated into that Real Madrid first team?
Yeah, he's set to join this summer after agreeing to join quite a few years ago now, and could only move when he turns 18. I think at the moment it feels like a bit of an afterthought, his arrival in the summer. We saw he spent some time in Madrid over the Christmas holidays, and obviously there was some excitement about that in the local press. But given the Mbappe reports, the centre-back drama, I don't think it's been, at the forefront of Madrid fans' minds, which seems crazy to say when it's this, this next big thing from Brazil coming over. There'll be excitement given how successful Vinicius and Rodrigo have turned out to be, but whether he can take on that mantle of being Madrid's centre forward instantly, I think is more up to debate. There's actually been a lot more excitement for Barca bringing over Vitor Roque, their young Brazilian, but I think that has more to do with Barca's problems in attack, whereas Madrid obviously, seem to be doing all right with Bellingham at the moment, and Endrick would only strengthen that.
Yeah, it took Vinicius a couple of seasons to bed in, to settle in. There was a while where Vinicius was also whistled at the Bernabeu and was kind of, I was going to say a laughing stock, but was not popular with Madrid fans or pundits. Didn't seem to be living up to his potential at all. Then it just clicked for him. When Ancelotti came back, summer 2021, things started to click, and he went on from there. So Endrick, I assume he's not going to go and play with Castilla. I assume he'll be with the Madrid first team next summer in preseason training for sure. And then maybe it depends on Mbappe, it depends on other players, whether he has a place in the first team squad. There's Renier, who was also signed for big money, has been around, gone on loan different places. Maybe he's going to make it finally, but people have kind of forgotten about him as well. That's the case at Real Madrid. They could spend 40-50 million on a kid, and if it doesn't work out, then it's not the end of the world for them. So Endrick, huge potential, could be an amazing player for Madrid, but realism as well about that. We're just going to have to wait and see and give him time to come through on that potential.
And just finally, a point on La Liga in general, away from Real Madrid in this January transfer window. What are the big things that people should be looking out for, the big deals that could happen, the players that maybe might be snapped up by the Premier League, which still has more money and has that allure as well, even though we know how big Real Madrid and Barcelona and Atletico still are for some players. Dermot, what are you looking at for January as being the main stories?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty quiet January around La Liga. For sure, there's not the money around that there is in the Premier League, and a lot of the clubs have their salary caps from La Liga, and they're pretty close to having maxed out on them. So they will, not really be able to sell players, or not really be able to sign players unless they wheel and deal and do some selling. Barcelona, really need a midfielder. Juan Laporta has been talking a lot about Edgar Davids, who he signed back in a long time ago now, but back in his first spell as president, came in January and really revitalized the team in a short-term kind of a deal. So Barcelona ideally would like to get a new midfielder in. They're looking at Alex Garcia, who's at Manchester City, who's former Man City midfielder, but he's playing really well for them. Girona, would not like to lose him, and maybe I was going to say you see it as a step down to move from Girona to Barcelona, which he probably wouldn't, but it would be a step down in the table anyway for now. So it's going to be very quiet. There's a lot of good players at Real Sociedad. If it was looking for somebody who Premier League clubs might look to try and take somebody, like, they've been doing phenomenally well. Kubo's been amazing for them. Japanese playmaker, Zubimendi in midfield, who Arsenal looked at before, has been, he's added goals to his game, scored as well last night, and he's somebody who Barca looked at but weren't able to afford. But Real Sociedad really want to keep this squad of players together. They've done fantastically well. They're into the Champions League. They've got a huge game coming up, maybe the biggest game in their history against Paris Saint-Germain, which is such a smaller club built around homegrown players against the huge team from Paris with the Qatari money. So it'd be a pity if they lost some of their players. But that's a fear maybe that there is in Spain, that the Premier League, if they come as Newcastle did for Isak a couple of 18 months ago, then it's difficult for Real Sociedad to turn the money down.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but it's not just the Premier League as well, because obviously we had in December Granada's really promising winger Brian Zaragoza agreeing to join Bayern Munich from next season. So I think there is it's fair to wonder if there is going to be some kind of talent drain in La Liga. I mean, just looking at the last season, the January transfer window spent by all La Liga clubs was 35 million euros compared to 842 million euros by the Premier League, which shows the kind of difference there. Clubs will be worried about the other way around, who's gonna take their players. But no, I don't expect too much business to be happening in Spain this January.
And is Saudi Arabia seen as a get out clause if money is needed to be brought in?
It definitely was last summer. Barca were happy to make use of it. They have talk of Marcos Alonso maybe moving, but then he's got injured. So I don't know. The case with Gabby Vega when he moved from Celta to Saudi Arabia was kind of maybe seen as a cautionary tale a little bit in Spain as a young player who could have had a lot of different options, including maybe staying at Celta. He moved to Saudi, didn't start very well from there. Things have gone better for him, and he still is a talented player. But that maybe will have warned off Spanish agents and coaches. But there's definitely there's definitely clubs who are looking to offload players. Sevilla, for instance, will be looking to wheel and deal with Victor Orta, the former Leeds sporting director there. They're on another new coach. Really need to shake their squad up, and they would have some older players who, if deals were possible to go to Saudi Arabia, then they would be delighted to make use of it. But haven't heard that is definitely going to happen. And as Tomas said, it's going to be quite quiet. It's unfortunate maybe from our point of view, but it's going to be a pretty quiet January in Spain.
We shall see. We shall see, Dermot. Thank you very much indeed to both you, Dermot, and to Tomas as well. Continued coverage, as I mentioned earlier on, and analysis and insight into everything in La Liga from our team of writers, our news team as well. And please remember to rate and review this podcast if you are enjoying it. Of course, leave us a comment, and you could subscribe to The Athletic for either $2 or £2 a month for the next 12 months by heading to theathletic.com/football pod. I will be back with your regular weekend preview tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.